A very good morning to you. I warmly welcome all of you joining us for the service organized by the youth of the Vellavatha Methodist Church as well as the youth committee of the Central District. Right, before we start talking about today and our message for today, let's take a look at the 1st of January 2020. Yes, it's a new year. We were all very hopeful. We made plans. We kind of, planned this year out. Maybe even the decade, we would have had long-term plans for the decade, earmarked some of these important events, figured out how we were going to do these things, made resolutions for that year, because everything was within our grasp. We had a plan, we knew what was going on, so we had a firm grip on everything, and we just had to make certain decisions and proceed. So we were very positive. We started 2020 like that, and here we are. That's what many people feel. Here we are. Suddenly, everything changed. I read on the internet that it's like Disney World lost its magic. That's how some of us feel, that everything just changed overnight. And here we are, uncertain, not knowing, and worst of all, we don't even know when all of this will end, when all of this will change, and what we are going to do until then. So many of us are going through a difficult time trying to grasp everything that's going on. Then some of us are going through practical difficulties, living through this very difficult period. I'm here to tell you, despite it all, God is with us. And why do I say so? And how are we going to take this difficult journey with God is the question. I take you to the book of Ephesians, chapter 3, verses 14 to 21. I'm sure you listened to the Bible reading before. So we see Paul, he was in jail at a time he was anxious about his believers. He goes on his feet and he prays, saying, "For this reason I fall on my knees before the Father." In the same way, I urge all of you today to go on your knees and fall before the Father. And Paul goes on to say, he prays that Christ may dwell in your hearts through faith. And he prays that you be rooted and established in love. He prays that Christ will dwell in our hearts through faith, and that we will be established and rooted in love, and thereby our spirits be strengthened and our spirits be full of God, and thereby God can work His power through us, fulfilling His promises to you and me. During these troubled times, there are many things difficult, there are many things that bother us, but three concepts or three issues that come up recurrently would be the fact that we don't know. Even if you ask somebody what's happening, they would be like, who knows, just living for the day. This is what people say, because we actually don't know. We don't even know when we will be starting work again. We don't know when our kids will be going to school again. We don't know when we will be seeing some of our loved ones. We don't even know whether we will be getting paid this month, or whether we will be able to have sufficient money to live the next day. So there are so many things that we don't know, and this lack of knowledge creates a gap, creates a void in our minds, because we are so used to knowing things. In this day and age, we know everything, and even if we don't know, we just Google it and we know it. So having known everything, we have gone to a state of knowing nothing, and it's just not us. We are in this situation where nobody knows anything. So this lack of knowledge is creating a lot of confusion, and many of us are in despair because we just don't know. And it is in this time and in this context, I urge you all, just like Paul prayed the other day, that Christ will be deep-rooted in us and be established in us, and we may be filled with love. I urge you all, fill your hearts with love. Fill your hearts with God's love. Fill your minds, that gap created by the lack of knowledge, that void created, just fill it up by God's love. Feel God's love. Just connect to Him in love, and you will feel so loved. And let God's love just overtake you. Don't just know love as a concept, but you need to go from knowing to being. Just be God's love and embrace His love, so that you will not feel any void. You will not feel any gap, but you know, though you don't know the things around you, you know that God loves you and you love God very much. And as Paul says, that you will be filled to the measure of all the fullness of God, and thereby God can work His power, His Spirit in you. We must remember, love surpasses all knowledge. I repeat myself, love surpasses all knowledge. We look at the Old Testament, we see David. David was a man who loved God very much, and God loved him. He was faced with the challenge of defeating Goliath, and he did that because he knew God loved him, and he had an experience with God. Due to those experiences with God, he knew God loved him, and that was enough. David wasn't as big as Goliath. David wasn't trained in martial arts. David didn't take self-defense classes or karate classes. But he knew he loved God and God loved him, and that was enough for him to defeat the giant. So I'm here to tell you, regardless of how big your problem is, how much you don't know how to deal with this problem, how gigantic things may look, just know that God loves you. Just feel Him, just feel that love, because just fill yourselves up with that love, so you know that God is with you, and you in that fullness of God will experience His power. Then I go to my next point, which is the lack of security these days. That is so. We are all afraid. We feel unsafe. That is why we take so much of precaution, but we are always very tense. We are always very unsure because we don't feel very safe. This sense of insecurity is dangerous, because this insecurity turns into fear, and this fear causes panic, causes anxiety. Satan enters your mind and ultimately depresses you. I'm here to tell you, you do not have to allow Satan to enter into your mind through fear or by means of insecurity, because you have faith. You need to have faith. You need to trust God. We know that God loves us so much. Fill yourselves up with love so you feel God's love, and then you know to trust Him. As Paul prays, I urge you to just allow Christ to dwell in your hearts and journey in faith, because as Christians, you and I know, we don't walk by sight but through faith. We walk by faith and not by sight. Then we take a look at Daniel from the Old Testament. He was a man of prayer. He was a man of faith. He trusted God, and that is why we see him escaping from the lion's den without a single mark. We see his friends Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego escaping the fire, coming out of the fire untouched, unharmed, because they trusted God. They believed in God, and God fulfilled His promises to them because they trusted in Him. So we Christians, we don't journey by sight but by faith. Next, we look at this factor of uncertainty. These are difficult times, so we really don't know what's going on, where we are heading. These uncertain times throw us into a lot of confusion, and we are discouraged because we had a plan. We kind of knew what we wanted, but here we are unable to attain them. But to us Christians, I'm here to tell you, uncertainty or certainty or knowledge doesn't really matter, because God promises to do exceedingly and abundantly more than we can ask or imagine. He promises exceedingly and abundantly more than you can ask or imagine. So it is not what we want, it is not what we think we know that we want from God or we want Him to do for us, but God is ready to do unimaginable things exceedingly and abundantly. But just fill yourselves up with God's love. Just allow yourselves to trust Him, to know His love, to feel His love, and fill yourselves up with God's nature, so you will be able to experience His power. Through the power that works within you, He will do for you exceedingly and abundantly. It's the same God of Moses who journeyed through them for 40 years through the wilderness and ultimately led them to the promised land, which overflows with milk and honey, that He is the same God that you and I trust, the God who has promised to do exceedingly and abundantly. So I'm here to tell you, during these troubled times, it is natural that we will feel afraid. It is natural we will be a bit discouraged. But take heart, be in faith, walk in faith, fill yourselves up with God's love, and experience God's abundant blessing and favor. Have a great week. God bless you.